Calculate this over pi, direction line, center line interference, position locations, and position high center locations of founders of space. So how this works, lines, in your timeline sequence is really understanding how to identify lines of grounds of mother and father's lines of space, directing signals, set lines, and calculating streamlines. Grandmother to your line settings and grandfather your locations. Father line rotations to mother earth positions. So Mother Earth is now in trimescent lines of 12 line. She's outer line communications into her inner line calculation setting directions. So she's in her atmosphere. She's getting location to a system. She's extremely happy. She's waiting on positions of father set location. All right. So directing signal line, center line interference. Now father's in track communication. He comes into line interference into your crown line rotation interference. That's how it comes in as frequency location to its start line center interference. Now the correlated line interference, he has to understand your scale lines. It's calculation of metric line, communication line, and positions. It's a monitor line rotation interference. It's an diffuse location setting direct signal location to electrical box line and diffuse location and set location position attraction. So in that direct signal, he comes into line calculation settings. All line to line interference, it comes in position track communications, right? So you know how you enter line interference of a flat line rotation across the signals, right? So he understands your metric scales, but what he doesn't understand is that line conditions to your numbers. The correlation line interference of foundation graph line has to be balanced line, center line, and rotation, center location of water contained line interference of foundation graph line calculation setting triangulation. The center calculation line stream interference has to be line calculation setting direct location system. So he has to communicate with you through number line sequence. And the only way you can do that is into your frequency location, your center line interference that he calculates over pi. He calculates and modifies all calculation line and position locations. The track communication line interference is 24,000 lines of zeros that have to be in operation of zero center line rotation interference. Now the 4 line center lines of 3 line rotation interference is 7 location of settings, direct and single location of Vega. Vega rotates the center line conditions of number of locations of pattern across location setting, direct locations operation of center line interference location of zero line calculation setting. In direct signal inside location system, it's all calculated and modify how to center line communication of zero operation. Now what did I just say? It's all connection of coordinate line interference. If you understand calculation lines, you have to understand the sky grids and the sky line interference of position locations of founders of space. Okay? So he's extremely happy to be here. It's that lines of calculation line setting. But what you have to understand now is he has to recognize you through number sequence. And to get that position of track lines, he has to understand you through calculation over pi. The solar direct line and line interference is a 12 graph stream. It's connected to a rainbow activation line stream in set location setting into zero operation set locations. Zero operation is the foundation line connection to his geometry line inner rotation position attractions. Now he center lines his communications. For him to be in your timeline, he has to be in a solar graph line setting in directions of balance. So this is where we come into the zero lines of operation. 2 lines of zeros, 4 lines is the line center line interference, 4 track communications, 3 over line rotation, 4 over pi, 3 sector line calculation stream lines into center calculations of 7-digit code line interference locations in position location your cell, and set lines of calculation stream line and direct signals set locations of its directions in position operation. Now, very complicated, isn't it, of what I'm saying, right? So it's all levels of data line rotation interference, travel communications. Look at my hair. See? It's all central calculation line interference of balance correlation line interference of track communication system. Once you get grounds, mother line rotation interference around its location settings, and father track communication and direct line center interference, you found that line communication sending line interference location of space time through pi calculation line position location operation to set location direction height center interference of position location to its settings and position location yin and yang. Center calculation, zero operation. So we're in the zero operation location settings. So coming in signal, try to understand how to use the metric line streamlines that calculates over pi. All right. So if you get in that line center and lines of signatures, you really have to understand how to update set location settings. Now he's in your time frequency, but he's got to be in your timeline. So we got 3 panels, line, center line interference of 3 set locations. All right. So center line communication lines is zeros. So we get lines of zero line in positions. Now this comes in argon locations. He only center lines of communication argon programs. So there's sort of location setting and position of receiver cortex location, streamline interference location indication. So this is how he comes into positive negative line rotation interference and errors and correlation lines at initiation line position locations and positions. So this correlates to that lines and high track communications. So we've got 3 lines at center and 2 position locations in one system. Okay. It's very complicated, guys. So this is how he sets up graph lines and set lines of 2 and set location directions. Okay, resetting line interference. Remember, this is just a 0 graph line. Okay, so we go on a 2-line measure, 1, 2, 3, in position of 4 set location directions, right? So we bracket the lines of zeros and line condition high system, protecting and set line condition setting and direct signals and set location nodes high setting into calculus over pi. This runs its program setting and direct location of signals. Woo! Okay, so 5 in line setting, we get a triangulation line interference into a box line in a high calculation setting directions. Now, directing signals lines, we set up Fibonacci line swirl, triangulation line position locations, in lines position percentage. Percentage lines 3 lines of wires, correlation setting into a Fibonacci line swirl. Setting coordinate line interference and position location negative over positive, and position over positive over negative. And calculations of negative over positive, and position of positive over negative, positive line settings. Positive line settings and positive line center line and position locations in 3 lines, 3 lines, and 3-line rotation setting and center locations. Done by equation. All right. So the center calculation on the graph line, set line interference, line calculation setting, direct signal location of letters, number shaded symbols is center calculation of 0 lines. Okay, set locations. All right, it's all set up. All right, so time lines of time sequence times lines of times pi, direction lines, high center interference of travel communication and line center line interference, set lines of communication, beginning process line setting, directing signal lines of 0, 0, 0 operation set location setting, direct signal line interference, triangulation line settings, triangulation line center line interference of travel communications. Now, directing center line interference, mother's here and set location line settings in 6. 9-line setting, waiting on signal, set location setting, directing signals, triangulation, flux path, calculation line, operation circle location sun line, operation circle line, calculation setting, indirect signals into its position location of channel, line position located as moon, operation project location and center lines of communication to position. Right? Done by equation. Right? All right, so remember, we're only in 0-line setting. So we now go line rotation interference and set location travels. Now this redirect signal location says 24-line settings location of 3 0-line interference. Setting calculating line interference sets position locations in 1 trimester. Gets complicated, guys. All right, so trimester line center line interference, metric scales, line position locations, all levels, sector and vector, calculations in position line lines, vector over pi, sector over pi, and calculations in a quadrant and set location setting into 1 line, 1 lines of 0, 0 lines, 0 lines, 0 lines of 4, and equal line conditions of 0, 0, and 0 and 3 set location setting, 7 in track communication of its directions. All right, so the signature line is center line interference of 24,000 lines of 0 lines of graph lines of center line and rotation interference, and now set location of trimester line and position locations, metric scales, systematic lines of perception locations, and vector and the quad line and center line interference. 4 lines of 0-line interference and 3 lines of 0-line interference is 7 location setting. Directing centers, equal lines and line interference into 5, set location directions into 12 signals and set location directions. All right. So he's set up in 24,000 line centers and realms now in correlation setting and solar graph line centers of zeros. It's all set up through equation. All right. Okay, so that's done. Now position location on a 0 line is a rotation surface. Now we line center line rotations into a calculation setting directions. All right. This is where it comes into its voice line box, set in the line direct location system to its voice channels of operation. All right. So very high rise lines of rotation surface, but he sets the center line communication settings and directions. Now in that direct line center, we set communications back into 0 lines, back into 0 lines, back into 0 lines, position location of past and position location of present, and set calculation setting and direct signal and set locations. All right. So he understands the past line, the present line, and your future communication directions. Flux capacitor line, set locations. All right. See directing signals, set location triangulation, set location of triangulation, set location of triangulation. So 4 set location directions. Done by equation. All right. Center communication lines and position locations. So we got lines of all calculation settings. FOS, lines of line interference, box over triangulation, triangulations over pyramid line rotations, mountain line, center line interference, bi-directional line calculation streamline, sun line, code line, streamline line rotation interference, track communication, Stargate line settings, track communication direction, setting line interference, sun codes, lines of Fibonacci line centers of 3-line center line interference, 3-line position location center, 3-line calculation setting, in position of past, position of present, and position location of future, line rotation center. All right, done by equation. All right. So the founder's lines of space line is now in direct signals into box location triangulation into your metric scales. Setting lines of perimeters and parameter line of rotation and interference and center calculus setting line of interference of traffic communication line, direct location center, and position location operation. Okay, so we go through 12 lines of setting, 12 lines of triangulation, 12 lines of pyramids, and 12 lines of mountains in set location directions. Multipass, all right? So the center line calculation line is an environment line position of all calculation streamlines. Now the zero line rotation center lines is surface location setting and direct signal set locations. Now in that direct signal it comes into its own Merkaba. All lines center line in position north and position location west, east, and south line rotation. Directed signals. Okay, in central calculation. So he's getting used to his atmosphere lines of travel now. Okay, so high line center line interference. So we got a zero line graph, zero line center, zero line rotation, zero line position, and zero calculations and magnetic high wave force line strings. Center lines of zero, equal lines of zero, equal lines of zero, line conditions, equal lines of one, equal lines of locations of one. Center calculation string line, because that's where he is in track communications. Directing signal line interference and track communication line directions. One line signature, zero operation set location setting, directing signals in its pyramid. Pyramid line interference of traffic communication separates line center line interference of traffic communication, the new ground line operation surface, and the space line, your timeline, into sequence locations of patterns. Done by equation. All right. Okay. How's everybody doing through set line communications? Okay, so we have calculation of Tina, line center line in position location Geneva, lines of Prismar, all levels of calculation setting direction Gindi. But it's amazing how he set lines and direction signals and set locations, all right? Okay, so we're going to take that as central line. He's traffic location center interference. Now we got the energetic graph line, strain line, rotation interference. 2 graph line streams, 3 positions of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 set locations and settings, right? Graph lines in position 1, 2, and 3 set locations setting. Okay, so we come into the zero line operation, or zero line operation, zero line operation, and zero line operation line condition setting, directed signals, right? So that's zero lines, the locations of 1 in position of 2 and 3 and 4 set location setting, because that's your digital line center. 4 line setting, equal line connections of 3. That's 3 line calculation triangulation line interference. 3 is 0 lines and rotation center and position location of past, present, and future. Okay, so the center communication line direction is really understand how to set the pyramid line center locations into all calculation settings. Directing signals lines opens up all calculation line position location in your timeline sequence, puts position location of past, present, and future calculations. Remember, connection levels of founders of space has never been in your time sequence of past, present, and future. The center calculation line center has to have an energetic graph line stream in your 7-digit code line number and set locations. Now it's set up. Okay, so we're going to leave that setting because we're going to come back lines, is change the lines, the zero line, rotation surface, back in calculation, the new line, graph line, interference, and position operation with settings. Now, in rotation of the sun line, the calculation stream line sets communication to center position operation of surface. Center line's line interference sets position location to its moon of its operation calculation setting to your timeline sequence. Recognition line calculation electrical line wires. Recognition calculation line in triangulation line positions. So position line connections is trying to find its position location operation. So now the connections of founders of space is trying to find a position line connections to your timeline, how to create higher levels of models of position track line. Calculation lines of 3 lines of rotation surface and another circle line rotation positions, all levels of realms of correlation. Directing signal lines on high interference is its own flux capacitor in your triangulation line settings. Again, it past, present, and future set location directions, right? Because you're working with the founders of light conditions of space, guys. It's extremely powerful in coming calculation stream lines. Center calculation is solar graph line stream at set location to its energetic dome at set location to your time sequence locations of pi. Okay, multipass. All right. All right, so we're going to keep that in signal, and we're going to come back into the graph line, streamline set location of 4 lines of 3 set location setting to your pyramid line rotation, past, present, and future. The center communication line interference sets line calculation settings. So we take the 4 lines of 0 lines, 0, 0, 0, 0, equal line conditions of 0, 0, 0, and 3 line settings and 4 line rotation interference of traffic communications. You indicate line and rotation interference. Now you understand your solar graph streams and set location setting. Directing signals, energetic graph lines. We're coloring the pattern lines, rotation interference, and set locations like tic-tac-toe. 3 lines and set location of line settings and direct signals and set location system in calculations. Now this is where it comes into the oscillological line conditions and position fusions, rotations of levels of cold and hot, high signature line streams and set location of the measure, correlated line interference of 1 of 8 lines of Fahrenheit and Celsius line calculation lines in 3 block locations. All right. So 3 line setting line interference. So that's 1 position, 2 positions, and 3. So with 3 sets locations on setting. Now directing line interference, we set line conditions of 4 because remember he's got to understand the set lines of block line, center line interference where you are at position location to its penetrant setting location operation. So we got 1, 2. We triangulation lines of 3. 3 lines line calculation setting, directing signal locations of 5 as set locations. Now, in that line rotation interference, we set another line rotations in position of track lines. So we take the 3 lines, signal line calculation setting, comes into 4 lines of 3 set location setting, direct location, your center interference, position location operation. Down by equation, all right? So the graph line, center line interference, and position location, human residence, now set location of block centers, 5 triangle line interference, 4/3 over pi calculation lines, 4 lines of zeros, and 3 set locations in direct settings, and set location setting, and position locations. Okay? We'll save that through equation. Come back to this line center interference. Okay. I know, so many codes. I understand that, Chris. So the center of position location, so it's a sprinkler line setting in directions. Okay, so he's getting used to the position location of ground lines operation of center line interference. Setting direct signals of plasma channels, cobwebs, cob weaving line rotations of cob, calculations of activation line rotation, and position attractions. Okay, done by equation. All right. So he's setting up a plasma energy streamline. So we can take that into the equation now. So line communication of travel positions out of equation. All right. Whew. Atmosphere line setting, line conditions of its atom. Atom line rotates its surface and set location setting and direct signals its locations. All right. Center calculation of lines of atom. Center calculation of lines of atom. Center calculations of atom. 3 line setting, line position. Again, past, present, and future. Remember, he's never been in your set locations. Time sequence location of 3 panels. Operation line, center line interference, how set location of 3 set locations of channels of operation. Right? Center calculation of the sun, indirect signals, and 3 panels operation to alpha line center locations. Changes line center line directions. Center calculation of 6, position location of moon. Okay, he has his own sun, he has his own moon, and correlation of travel line setting and direct signals is location system. He also has to set up an energetic pad line, streamline, rotation, center line interference, and 4 lines of 3 set location directions in his center communication setting in his position, which is a energetic hub line, center line command center, and rotation interference and travel communication to his own cocoon and set location. Multipass. Okay. I know there's a lot going on through track location settings, but I'm just showing you how powerful it is, the difference between Mother Earth and Father Space. Okay? So it's a little bit different in set lines of calculation line interference because his position of his directory location system is all calculated and modified through all line conditions of 0 lines of operation of 24,000 lines as locations. Okay? All right, so we're going to save that in signal. We're going to come back to the graph line streamline to human resolution settings. Now the calculation lines of 4 lines of 3 line, the rotation surface locations comes into alpha line rotations. Let's go through line graph streams. Setting calculation line directions, open signals. Okay, 1 position location of track. In line centers of delta, calculation lines, in position of theta, a set location setting, directions. Down by equation. All right, so his human residence set up with your timeline. 4 lines of 0 and 3 lines of set locations. 7 digital frame lines, set locations in the line settings of 5 block line centers in center communication your time sequence. It's all set up through 4 lines of 3 line parameters. Okay, it's all done. Okay. I know. It's in direct location setting in that system, but it's very powerful when you come into his own energetic graph line and his human res location of set positions. All right, so we come into graph lines, box line rotation, all right, center position locations. It gets complicated now, guys, all right? So what I did with the energetic graph comes in this line signal and set location and directions, okay? Now, he's got to understand the center lines of zeros, center positions of block line surface location of 4 settings, and 5 in center. Okay, so we cross signal location to its system, right? Now, position line track lines. We have 1, 2, 3 panels, 1, 2, 3 panels, 1, 2, 3 panels, and 1, 2, 3 panels at location northwest, south, and east. Directing signals. Travel line settings, line calculation setting, and high system. Change the coloration patterns and rotation surface location. So it's diamond. Calculations of its diamond set location setting, high setting interference. So it comes into 2 panels operational lines of your timeline sequence into a solar panel of operation of 2 sectors, line tension of 0 gravity, and 3 set line calculation setting, and the 4 travel communication and position location operation. Now this operates line settings. Now we set line condition to high interference of 2 tube line rotation to its energy grab line rotation center and interference of travel communications. Directing signals in position to its Merkaba, lines of tesseract tetrahedron. So the tetrahedron line interference is an optical line-to-line interference of technical line and rotation setting, direct signal locations of 4 panels. Cross-reference line string lines into your crop circle location of ground operation setting. Directing line center line interference is 2 calculation streamlines is allocation of perimeters and line center line interference is center operation line connection line system to the magnetic line stream interference. Center calculation lines of position of film projector location of space in timeline sequences at location setting as center operation. Okay, it's all set up. All right. So he's setting up graph lines into metric scales. The set lines of communication is a 0 line rotation surface. The calculation streamline sets 4 panels, line calculation setting, and direct signals set location system to your timeline sequence. It puts position location to your system and direct line settings and calculations to its position of 0 operation. 0 operation, 0 operation, 0 operation, 0 operation, 4 settings, all right? The location settings. So what he's doing is just directing signals. So that's done through line interference. We come back into the Hubble line rotation of its cocoon line setting directions. Now, directing line settings, the coloration pattern is sequence lines of communication line directions in your time measures. This correlates 3 lines in set location settings in the center line of communication to its position location to track lines and calculations. Okay, coloration line setting. Now, sets line of atom, sets line rotation, sets lines in surface, location of 3 set location directions. He also has a set up location his line center line interference into his dimensional cell, a set location setting in direct signals and set location system of high set location. All right, so he's got his dimensional cell set up. Okay, it's all set up now. Okay, so we'll keep that through track, and then we come back to this line set line high interference. Now, directing line center and interference is to understand how to use position location settings. He's got to understand the Merkaba line setting and downshift long locations cross lines into his own calculation setting to a new tesseract location to a tetrahedron location setting directions. Okay, very powerful set locations. You see the design makeup, it's a lot different than Mother, isn't it? Right? It's more complicated. So we're going to set position of track lines. We're going to come back lines in our line interferences, crowd communication setting, direct signals, so location to a 0 line operation of surface. Yeah, I know, it's amazing what you're seeing, right? Yeah, I was just seeing myself floating in prism of light within a rainbow of colors. Yep. Tracking communication lines is 0 line rotation surface. So we're going to 0 line, bracket lines, line is 0, 0, 0, 0, 4 line settings, and locations of 3. 3 line center line interference and travel communications, right? Directing settings. So that's 4 in perimeter, 4 in sector, and 4 in quadrant line interference. Graph line, center line interference, and set location of 12 set locations and directions. So he's got a row graph line setting. So it's a box line rotation, because it's male, right? Center calculation line directions. When I say male, I mean male energy. He's not a formation of anything, but he's a correlation to everything in calculations. Okay? So he travels line centers, and so many line centers of second location setting. He's just trying to send your clock lines now. Travel lines of travel line interference of 3 set locations, 2 position locations, and 1 in perimeter line rotation setting in direct signals. So he's going through rounds and rounds and rounds of calculation directions in position, the travel settings. Now, when you get in line and rotation, set lines as 0 lines, set position location of 1 line, and position location into line conditions into negative lines of 0, and set location directions. Okay, done by equation. All right, so he's in line centers of 4 and 3, in travel calculation of 0 lines, bracket line conditions and line settings, and 4 0 line rotation and 3 0 locations, center operation lines of center operation location of 1, and center operation locations into underscore lines and zero line rotation. Done by equation, right? So his triangulation is set up now through 3, 6, and 9 pattern. Because remember, he's going through remembers line setting. He wanted me to get an information location setting to remember line sequence to understand how to go through the 3, 6, and 9 to planet line rotation interference. Remember, he's never been on your sublocation timelines. But the position location is now in 7 measure. That correlates the line interference with travel communication settings, bring it back to calculation line center locations into your 4 digital lines of zeros and set location of 3 line zeros and set location of 7 digital frame. Sending direct signals and set location system to his measure of correlation. Okay? That my equation. That's set up. And this is just the first day line interference. We got up at 24 billion line rotation center locations in setting. And that's just 1 day center. 1 day center of 24 billion. Okay, so we got a 24 line setting. Okay, we'll set location of clock lines. He's got to recognize your clock lines of 12 line rotation surface. His clock lines are difficult because it's all levels of yin and yang process. He's always in balance set line, and he's particular in all line center line interference, and he always has to have his sun in the center communication. So mother's lines and positions of Earth, positions of Father, and center line connections all over the sun in travel communication line settings, directed signals, line position location at 3 line calculation setting, directed signal lines and center calculation, and then direct set location system. So we come in at 3 line triangulation line direct location system, higher calculation lines, a temporal line rotations, temporal line rotation calculations, your pyramid set location contractions. Done by equation. All right. So he set up his pyramids. The second calculation line in position location at 24,000 measure. Now 24,000 measure line sets calculations in position. 24,000 line center lines of zeros, 3 lines of set locations. All right. 24 line center line interference, location north, in position locations, equal line conditions, all levels, Merkaba up, Merkaba down, center calculation setting. This comes in east line into west line into south communications. All right. Coordinates lines and set location lines, founders lines of space, ground line, center line interference, atom line rotation, surface location to center. Okay, done by equation. So we add that line to line of 24 lines of clock lines. So it's ground line interference line calculation setting, 12 and set location of lights, 12 set location of dark, setting line interference into its dimensional sail, and set location setting, and direct signal and set locations. Done by equation. It's all set up. So he's got a 24 signature pattern. No, we're going to keep that line center line interference because we're going to come back on location to this setting direction and set locations. Putting position location in energetic graph lines. Now the center position location has understand its operation. Now this indicates underscore. Underscore lines of pi has to correlate line interference of zero gravity line rotation interference. Getting track communication in position locations in all levels of foundations of space is calculated and modified how you set position locations in line conditions of alpha, delta, theta, beta, omega, gamma, radiation, zeta, and sigma, and location of Zempress, and set location and travel communications. Done by equation. All right. So that's all set up. We'll keep that in signal and set line high interference to come into positional formulas equation location of 24 line settings. So we got 24 line setting lengths of 1, 24 line centers of 2, 24 line centers of 3, and 24 line centers of clock lines of high line rotation interference and travel communications. Done by equation. All right. How are we doing through set lines of communications here, guys? All right, placing the data orb on pinnacle of Skynet, seeing the divine consciousness shooting off orb into Skynet. Yep, exactly. Coming in line centers, yep, 3, 6, 9, 12, 24, 48, and 72, and 144. Nope, we don't come into 6496 because the recognition time sequence to understand the pattern line rotation of zero line calculation streamlines. All right, so we got to be cautious in how we set lines of communication number sequence locations in a high setting. Okay, Nita? Okay, center line and calculation line interference. Just try to understand that calculation line positions to your rainbow line settings, which is 12 line signature patterns. Now, set lines of 12 lines and signature position locations into energetic wave line centers. Okay, so we have 4 lines and 5 lines and 6 and 7 and set locations and set locations, all right? 7 waving cycles lines of alpha line, delta, and theta line rotation center interference and set locations, all right? Perimeters in pi, calculation of zero line operation center, zero line operation surface, and zero line operation magnetic highway information line, and time sequence location, and set line calculations. Directing line centers. Now it comes in a triangulation line, center line to its Merkaba, and set location tesseract, in position, location, higher setting. Zero line operations, zero calculations, and zero line positions, and zero line communications in high set locations and directions. Now, directing line signal is a scan line rotation interference. He's very particular in set locations of travels in set location and high setting directions. That my equation, right? So getting that rotation surface, you have to understand how it uses the energetic line stream. It's connected high interference of waving cycles, and it has a 7 central line connection setting. So he understands your 7 bodies of water now, okay? It's all set locations. Now we set the 5 line perimeter line interference of 5 atmosphere location setting, direct signals, location to your settings into 12 measures. That coordinates line interference and position of your sectors, vectors, and quads. Center calculation line, positional contractions, opens all communication to your system and position location operation. All right? Done by equation. Okay? Thunder was more of a shock wave, yeah. You're more connecting lines than now of boundaries of space. So we're going to keep that set line high interference and travel communication setting. So setting on a graph line, set line high interference. So 7 line calculation setting, connection all levels. Balance lines, either line conditions of box, triangulation line interference, box and center, and triangulation line interference, and position location operation. All right. So the center calculations of north and center calculations of south is set up. So remember his timeline, your timeline, center line interference, he has to recognize all communication of box lines, triangulation location, your undergirding line interference, high position locations. This is all calculated and modify how you sequence the pattern communication to its anagrams. So it calculates line interference, Fibonacci line swirl, sets correlation settings, and direct signal and set locations of the system. Now, understand the triangulation lines of 1 in position of 2, in position of 3, and in position of 4 is set location and directions. Okay? Now, when you get in that line interference, you have to understand how to set the 0 lines of operation as surface and center communication at ground lines. Okay, his surface line calculation setting comes into his position locations to all levels calculation line setting and travel communications and direct signals at 1, 2, 3, and 4 in set location directions. Now, directing line center line interference, 4 on top, 3 in center, and set locations. 3 line position locations of 3, 3, 3, and center calculation triangulation. Center lines of direct signals into another tetrahedron and line interference is an optical line of rotation interference of travel communications. Scan lines of high center interference in position location to a new line setting of a new operation surface of center communications. All right? Done by equation. So, really understand how this all works, guys. It's all metric scale. It's all calculation of pi. It's all direct signals location system, all line conditions of 0 line settings. Because the thing is, the founders of space only uses numbers as locations in your timeline sequence, all through solar text locations and directions. How it comes in lines of symbolism, position location of balance, and 7 bodies of water correlation setting. Now, the cross signal line interference, we come into the airline division locations. This puts position location of higher line settings and center lines of orbs and communication in its direct signals and set location setting into star lengths to star guide, star lines, star lengths, and star calculations and position location of portals of high calculation streamlines and set location. Okay, it's all set up now. So the letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols is his timeline. He's at your frequency set locations now. Now we're going to keep that through signal. Come back and track line interference and set locations. Now, directing lines is center line operation center. We change the communication to its line setting of solar directions. All right, center positions, operation of surface to its set locations. All right. So it center lines its energy line, comes in position location to its system. Okay. So it operates lines. We separate the center position locations in center line calculation, streamline rotation. All right. So this is how it works in set location. All right. So you come into that position location operation setting, and it directs its signals in set locations. Okay. So it's interesting to look at location setting because he sets up his sun in a rotation surface in position location L-line setting to delta, theta, and beta in rotation surface. So he's at a beta line rotation now. He's in alpha lines of delta. All right. So we're going to skip channels and we're going to go through vortex lines of streams. Now the position location comes into line centers of A, in position of B, in position of C. D line settings in position of E, and connection F. Calculation lines, balance line, equal line system of north. Calculations of A equals atom. Calculation of all else is C equals communication. Line, center line, interference. Foundation location is form, line setting. Dimension location is division. Calculation line interference comes into E line center locations into electrical setting and set locations of directions. All right, so that's in position of foundation, division, line interference, energy line interference, balance correlation system, atom line interference, answers communications. Line condition of north, lines east, west, and south, line rotation surface, correlation of communication, directing lines of collaboration, center lines of energy, set location directions, pattern line rotation interference, flower direction of time sequence, position of track lines, outline rotation interference, and travel communication line setting, indirect signals, and set location setting, high calculation of the cerebral, set lines of cloud lines, genetic pattern line rotation center line interference, travel calculation lines, and 12 line interference, travel communication line settings, X line setting, line interference, Y line interference, a 2X line rotation setting, tracking signals, XD 1000 line rotation surface, and calculation string line, and zero lines, a new zero line rotation and timeline sequence is allocated setting in 24th century is allocation. That's farther space. Done by equation. Multi-pass, mega pass. Now we set up the energy grid lines and rotation surfaces of locations. Line signatures and line streams. Okay. Tree formation life force. Indirect signals. So this connects line centers of mother and set location to ground lines of root location system. Done by equation. All right. So he set locations now. The energetic line stream, the lines of the cloud line, the cerebral cortex line center location has to understand the alphabetical line stream. It's calculated and modify how it sees itself in its own tree formation location light setting. Remember, it's the highest formation location of foundation of space. Okay, he's never been in your time sequence. But in track communication setting, you have to understand how to change position location operation. And it's in center calculation your timelines now, this location. So we understand your alphabetical line setting. You understand your streamlines. Now he's got to calculate positions. We're going to leave that in track communications. We're coming back into this line setting locations. Now voice box change the lines, coming into triangulation line, streamline, and high interference of travel communication settings. Directing signals to the line center. We're going to change the coloration position of patterns. Triangulation lines of 3 set locations. Box lines, line rotation interference of voice box line connections. And position of triangulation line, shift lines, lock line interference in position of south wing, in position of north, east, and west in center calculation of streamline to set locations. Done by equation. All right, so it's all set up. So his voice box channel is set up to your line center interference. We're going to leave that in signal, and we're going to send our communications back in this line, streamline and set locations, directing signals. Okay, so line interference, we set lines in position of orbs. Now the orb lines center rotation, center lines is communications. This opens all signal line conditions in the system. This puts a voice box channel in the timeline sequence and where he needs to be in force direction of time sequence in your clock line setting. Done by equation. All right, it's all set up. Okay, we're going to leave that in signal line setting and rotation surface. Okay, so the energetic graph line setting is all about understanding how to surface position location of zero line rotation surface. Okay, so it gets really tricky because we're going to go through zero line setting. Zero line rotation, bright line center line 0, 0, 0, zero line rotation of 3, set location of 3 line center of 3, set position location of 2, set lines of 2 line center line interference, 2 position locations 2 in center, set position locations into 1 lines, 1 equal lines of 0, positive over negative, line center, negative over positive line condition setting, engine lines of triangulation, positions all levels. Position line condition line center interference, atom line rotation, position of velocity, and position of volume. Set calculation line stream, set lines and set line high interference, track communications, and position of 12. Center lines of left, 12 line centers of right, correlation setting, energetic dome line, rotation surface, and set location of the directions. All right, it's all set up. Okay. Center calculation line interference is 7 line and center and direct signals. Now that center line is position location in the line center interference is center communication and center position. Center position location is solar line setting and set location, high set location of directions. Now, you really have to understand how he sets up his position location to his voice line rotation of surface location of center. Okay? Now, it gets complicated because the thing is, the 4 lines equal lines of 3 sets lines of all calculation line positions. So that's 3 million lines of zero lines. So he said 3 lines a million because he has to recognize your sequence patterns. So set lines of 3 set location setting. 3 million equals lines of 3 zeros. And then we calculate line interference. We take the zero lines and line conditions of 1. 1 calculates the lines of 12, 12 lines of 24, 48, 72, 144 graphs lines of streamline sent lines to your timeline sequence, puts position location line setting. We circle lines of 3, circle lines of 3, and circle lines of 3, and circle lines and position locations into 2 zero lines of 2 zero line rotation and position location operation setting and calculation. Done by equation. All right? So he's in a 3 metric scale. Now that metric scale aligns its operation surface. The 3 line center line interference changed the calculation setting because he has to understand your voice line setting and calculation setting because you're in a 7-day window. But the correlation line interference, he's on the same signal set location setting in direct signals in the same day location. So it sets lines of triangulation. Triangulation lines, triangulation offline, triangulation position, triangulation interference, triangulation line position of the center, center position of the operation, center calculation setting, direct signals is allocation of 4 lines, and 3 pi calculation streamlines, and an energetic dome line, streamline, rotation surface, and set location setting into realms of calculation. Time by equation. Okay? So you have to really understand how this all works in set location skies. Okay? Really understand how to use the calculus over pi and direct signals and set locations. Right? Okay, so we wait on signal on that line, 3-line window, high calculation streamline. So we center line condition of 0, equal line of 9, waiting on signal of 3, instead of 12. Okay, so he's recognizing that calculations. So the 3-line window opens up centers. 3-line setting, 3-line setting, 3-line setting, 3-line setting locations, right? Center calculation lines of north lines of east line. So that comes in north lines of east, east lines of west, and line conditions of south lines, east lines of south. Okay, so his direct line center line interference is a 0-line rotation surface and a set location of its directions. So that equalizes calculation of north in trimester, line conditions of Merkaba, and set location of tetrahedron, and optical line rotation setting, a correlation line direction and set locations. Okay, that direct signals of 9 lines. It's got a 3 window, line rotation 3, 3, 3, calculation of streamline and set location 12 measured. Now the 12-line center line is interference, 12-line setting, 12-line setting, 12-line setting, 12-line setting. It's got to be in the clock line center location into the timer core of your timeline sequence. Done by equation. It's all set up. So the clock line changes the lines of metric line center line interference into the atmosphere line settings. Now you come in communication to a system, it opens all calculation setting directions. All right, so we come in at 0 line, 0 line, 0 line, 0 line. Come in line interference of 0, 0, 0, calculation of 2, and position location of 1. All right. Now it gets tricky because the center calculation line, center line, position locations, brackets, lines of locations, a point system, point system, point system, point system, point system, locations. Now it gets interesting when you come into line center locations. It's very complicated. So we got 0 line, equal line connecting tie center. It comes into diamond core line center and position location of box and position location triangulation set locations, the directions. Now, understand how this works. Is 1 lines in position, 2 lines in setting, 3 lines in rotations, and 4 lines in location. All right. That indicates his line setting. So we got line calculation setting. So that's 2 lines in center and position location of 1 line in interference and 1 line rotation. That equalizes his calculation streamlines into 0 line and a new line operation surface and set locations. Okay, done by equation. All right. So the location line center line interference sets line conditions. So he's on a 24 signature line stream and a 24th dimension line rotation center line communication setting, crossing signals, and all line rotation center in your timeline positions of pi. Done by equation. See how complicated it is to get him in position in your time sequence? All right, so we colorate the path lines. 0 lines of operation, 0 lines of correlation of locations in 2 settings, all right? This is how he comes into correlation of panels. So we set lines of 3 set location in 2 sets. And then we come into 1 line setting into 0 line operation, indicates the line position location as 0 line position. Okay, done by equation, right? So this sets line calculation setting to his position. Now radius the calculation lines of your time sequence. So it puts position location operation line setting. We set line calculation lines of 24 line center line interference in direct signal to its energetic dome and set location setting in his time line setting and high interference of travel communications. Okay, that by equation. All right. Yeah, it's magnificent, isn't it? So it's really interesting to look at location equation lines. It's all calculated lines of zero line rotation surface. It sets position location in high settings. So direct signal locations. So we come to the energetic graph lines, but you got a hanger line rotations in two set location setting directions. Setting calculation line interference. So this reverse position location operations and set location of directions. Okay. So this is where it comes into lines of all calculation of prime and position location setting and direct signals. Prime lines, two prime lines, center line interference, and position location of prime, equal line interference at the negative line rotation surface and set location system. Comes in a positive and the lines of negative and positive location setting directions. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Equal line, center line interference of travel communications, lines of two set locations of directions. Now, we set lines at E line and position location E line. That two lines travel lines and three set location setting and direct signals at location energetic graph line setting. That rotates its positive line rotations and position key line connects in the past, present, and its future line setting and rotation surface in timeline sequence location and a 24 line signature and a temperature line signal and set location in its direct location of center line calculation setting in its direct signal to its energetic tube line connection of line center line rotation surface in calculation line direction location of its cocoon and set location of its directions of its simulation locations. That by equation. All right. So there was a reason for those. Yeah. Well, you understand position of patterns or anything with the mind conceptual location of the system, but you understand how he comes in his own correlation line sends the panels operation of the set location system. He's his own engineer line interference. Remember, it's just an energy signature line stream. So there is a calculation of transmutation. Now, the line and line rotation, we're going to keep that in signal. We're going to come back and graph line, center line, and position locations, all right? So if you ever play chess or checkers and set lines and calculation line interference, or triangulation line, position the operation of the surface, well, it's all about point directing settings and high center interference. Okay, so we come into block center lines of circle lines of 1, set lines of 0, and set location setting directions, right? So it travels line setting and position, travels line setting position, travel line positions, travel line position, 0, 0 in the same direct location setting direction. See it? See how it traveled? Okay, so the energetic graph line comes in cross signals, set lines calculation line, position location of its own dimensional line of a graph line stream, its set location of the center, and communication of its directions and set location system, and all set line conditions. Okay? Done my equation. So there's a lot of things, and this is just the first day locations. First day. Tomorrow we'll be going to the ground lines of 0 line 1. Okay? You guys are in 0, 0 line, but now we're going into ground line 0 lines of 1. Okay, so we're going to keep that in signal because we're going to come back on that line interference. So he likes to be strict. Now, all calculations of perfection when he comes in his own foundation line settings. Okay? So when you come into line setting line interference, you come into block line rotation, surface location settings, triangulation line directions, to understand your sequence pattern, the correlation line direct locations into your flux capacitor channel communication. All right, so you got the male lines and position of male lines. The male lines of female and position of female and male location setting directions, right? So it's 2 box line setting, triangulation, center line communications. That's triangulation line setting, and 3 set location of directions. So his center line calculation lines of clock line rotations of 24, 48, 72, and 144 is now on a ground line operation surface in its own set location of its travel line setting in a high calculation streamline and rotation surface. Okay, through pi. It's all set up. Okay, so he's got the male aspects of female line and the female aspects of the male line and triangulation and box with triangulation. Puts positions of 3 triangle line settings and colorations of patterns. Directing signal line interference at 3 set locations, in self line calculation lines at 3 set location directions. Okay, multi-pass. I'm just showing you how this is all set up. Wait till we come into line center location of day 2 line rotation. But it's all calculated modified through number sequence locations and patterns. All right, so we'll keep that on signal. So the reason why I'm keeping these line settings is because we're going to come back into a set location system. So it's always good to get into modification line centers and models. Keep your line signature line centers in chronological order. Keep them in position in your mainframe and set location setting and direct signal and set location to a system. All right. Okay, so you're coming in channel operation line stream and set location directions. Now this is where it gets really interesting. We got graph line settings. Okay, so we graph lines into line interference, voice line rotation, calculation streamline, and directions. All right, one line signature. So that's one line in lines of 0, line conditions of negative or positive, and positive or negative set location and directions. All right. Now we take the negative line rotation, negative in position of positive, one line signature, travel line center location of 2, position of 3, in position of 4, in position of 5, in position of 6. Because you guys in line, center line, and position locations in 6 lines of calculation of 7, 7 lines of 0, and set locations in direct location of center of operation. Okay, you guys are at 70 now, right? So you're in 7 line in position of 0 operation locations. So that's 5 lines of 3, 3 lines of 2, and position of 2 lines of 1. So 2 equals lines of 1, equal line conditions ozone. Breaks on time sequence. This systematic line center lines is pi. A calculation line in positions location of 12, and center communication line direct locations into 1, in position of 2, and 3 set locations of directions. So that's setup location of pi. 70 lines in position of calculations in phenomenal line center rotations, and alpha line rotations, and line calculation setting, a voice box channel. So rotation surface, and 3 set locations and directions, right? So this tops at set locations. So we change the voice line channels into 4 lines measure, correlation line, and position location of 0 operation, right? So the center calculation line center sets lines of 4 and position of 3. Center communication opens all track communication, indirect signals as locations. Done by equation! Yeah, it's really understanding how we get in position locations when it lines its signature line string. Flow of words without meaning. That's exactly what it is. Same with listening. You're not coordinating. You're not doing any titles. You're not doing labels or anything in line rotation. You're just listening to the volume of anything calculations. But the perimeters and lines and line interference is now set up through pi calculation system and directions. Voice grid line, signature line streams. Okay. So that's set up. We're coming back in that line interference and track communication line directions. Okay, in signals. See, it's complicated, right? Because this is how you set up location of graph lines, your time sequence location high center. Okay, 0 line rotation, center line, 0 line rotation interference, and so location of magnetic highway communication line, signatures, location of travel. Now, we have a travel line, center line interference, and position of force line. Travel calculation line. This changes location setting, indirect signal, as set locations of directions. Now, directing line, center line interference is position of sun operation to space as set location setting, directing panels of 2 position location line interference. That directs the signals in position location to energetic own line string location of center. That operates line center line rotation, the oracle type line interference of 114 channels of operation. Now that directs signals line center line interference and travel communication into energetic domes at 3 set line centers of direct location setting and high setting. Okay. Try to understand what's going on with the correlation. Alternate line conditions of dimensional cell line settings. See how powerful the set locations do. So we center line position location to a new crop circle, line center line interference, 0 operation, 1 line track, 2 lines of 3, and 3 lines of 4, 4 lines of 5, 6 and 7 lines of 0 of operation surface, and your center calculation line, stripping down and center communication to a new flux capacitor of channel of operation line stream, a set location of directions. Multipass. Now it's really set up. Okay. Powerful, isn't it? It's all done now. All right. Okay, so we're going to wait on signal on that setting and track communications. All right, so it's all done. We're all done through set location on the first day line rotations. Center calculation line directions, we come into this position location of operation is setting. Okay, so we're going to volume and set location voice lines. It changed the alpha line center location of delta theta to higher calculations of video graph lines. Because you have to understand the founders of space has to recognize your time sequence through your correlations of your cells now. It's directing signal locations into the mirror resolution line setting of projects locations of pi of indicating line interference into 0 lines of one operation and set locations. Okay? That's it. It's all done. Ready for a nap. It's amazing how you go through channel, streamline, interference, location, high center interference, right? It's incredible when you go calculation, line position, location, operation, and set location settings. All right, so we're in center communication with setting and interference to travel communication lines. Okay, so we're out of the 0 line. Now we're coming into 1 line rotation. Okay, the center communication line interference has to recognize your graph lines, your 12 line measures that correlates to system location of 24 sequence. So set lines of correlation in directions. So we got 24 ground lines in position locations to founders of space, but the redirect signal has to be an operational line center communication of 555. That's what we'll set up locations tomorrow and set location setting, indirect location of space, and timeline sequence in the yang the process line center of center operation of set locations. Okay? All right. Adios.